Welcome to Exception Seekers, the show where we challenge conventional views on youth mental health and explore stories and experiences that offer alternative perspectives. Welcome to another episode of Exception Seekers. Anne and I are here today to talk about topics that we find interesting and we hope present different perspectives for you to think about. And the topic that we are talking about today, that's near and dear to our hearts, is summer camp and everything that entails. So, Anne, why don't you start, and maybe just with sharing your experience with summer camp, or why this would be something that you would be so excited to talk about.
Camp is always something so exciting because for me, it kind of describes the trajectory of where my life is now. But I was very much, I grew up, my parents immigrated from Hong Kong, and camp was actually not a part of my childhood at all. And I think it was when I was a teenager, that there was a leadership and training program at camp that my parents were like, okay, well, this makes sense, right? We want our child to be a leader. There's an outcome here. So let's sign her up for this leader and training program.
Right.
And I actually did a program in the city for a month. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, camp.
Okay.
And then I had a second, like August was a leader in training program at an outdoor adventure camp. And that was a completely different experience. So I
Oh,
got bussed
interesting.
out of, yeah, I got bussed out of the city, out of Scarborough to King City. And for me, that was like, I'm going up north. Like I was like, I don't know where we're going. And looking out the window and like, being surprised that there are like cows out there and there's like
Right.
farmland.
Yeah, okay.
And then anyway, I landed at this beautiful campus with this lake and completely out of my element. Like, did not know what to do, didn't know like even getting changed for the beach, right? It's like, oh, what do I do? Do I wear my towel around me? Do I not? What's the camp culture here? So I just felt completely like an outsider and like I didn't know what I was doing. And that kind of led to me being a pretty quiet kid that whole month at camp. And I think slowly, like into week 4, was probably when I came out of my shell and then was this kind of a little bit more like free and wild and silly. But that really was my experience as a camper. And, a couple years later, I got invited back for an interview for a job. And I was like pretty confused. And I think in my interview, I had said to the program director who was interviewing me, like, what, like, why would you want me to work here? Because I was not like a rah camp counselor.
Right.
I didn't know I had to learn the songs. I had to learn all of the culture. And he looked at me and he said, I want a kid who's a little bit more quiet to look at you and go, whoa, I can do that someday. And for me, like, oh, what a
That gives me
moment.
goosebumps
Yes.
as you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What an absolute moment of just like being seen for me exactly as I was and not needing to fit some sort of a mold. And then like that got me hooked. I worked at that summer camp for 8 summers after that. And
Right.
then,
Yes. It
moved
pulls
on
you
to
in.
another. It pulls you in. And then I was at another camp for a season and then another one for, 3 or 4 years after that. But yeah, camp became such a part of my like teenage years, my very formative years. And I also say like at that camp in particular, that's where I grew up. That's where I discovered who I was outside of the confines of like who should I be, right? What should my grades be looking like? What should my job in the future be? And
Yes.
being on this trajectory, it kind of just opened me up to
Mhm.
freedom to be.
I think that's such a beautiful, beautiful piece of camp. I was 11 my first summer, and like I remember vividly the very first night was a campfire with your section and watching these counselors sing this ridiculous song that we were all a part of, and there was just this magic of the fire and the singing and everyone together and laughing. And I remember just thinking, I have found, I have found my place.
Hmm.
I have found my place. And it was that, yeah, almost that chance to discover who you are. Yes, outside of school was a big one for me. Being able to have the freedom and acceptance to be different, I think,
Hmm.
than I had to be at school and at home, and just this yeah, self-discovery. Like I've never enjoyed where I was as much as I did in when I was at camp.
I found myself even when I worked there, just like lingering at the end of the
Mhm.
day. Like the first camp I worked at was a day camp, and
Right.
just lingering. Like
Yes.
I just didn't want to leave. I wanted to hang out with everybody, and I
Yes.
wanted that to be almost like forever because you can just
Hmm.
be whoever. And when you're
Hmm.
talking about the songs too, I just think about how like it was so silly, but
Hmm.
in that silliness, it gave you freedom to just be, and nobody was worried about, being judged or, feeling embarrassed. And because it felt like, well, we're all putting ourselves out there, so you might as
Yes.
well. And it
Yes.
just like pushed me to be able to be that more freely.
Yeah, and I think there was something I remember how much I would admire my camp counselors. And because they were just these very cool, confident, I held them up on this kind of pedestal of like just the leadership skills that they had and the qualities I saw in them that I liked. And, reality is they were like 17, 18-year olds who are also still trying to figure themselves out. But
Mhm.
the that opportunity to have them as the role model, different
Mhm.
than like teachers who are adults and parents, but to have that other age lead you, I think is, yeah, it was so special and influential because you could have different conversations with them and just seeing them differently. And then I think when I was in that role, like the leadership opportunities that camp provides, it's a tremendous amount of responsibility and, ownership to plan programs and take care of younger people. That I think is a really unique opportunity for that age too. Like there aren't many jobs when you're 17, 18, 19 where you're, yeah, have that level of responsibility, or, giving feedback to people, receiving feedback, right?
Mhm.
And being
Mhm.
like learning how to do that at such a young age. They're just like incredible skills built into what seems, I remember people saying like, oh, get a real job one summer, you'll have to get a real job. Um, and I just think like, I don't think I could have had a job that better set me up for future careers.
That's so true. Like, giving feedback as you're saying that, like you're just a teenager and
Mhm.
you have to sit down with somebody midsummer to give
Yeah.
them feedback about how, the first half of their summer has been. And sometimes that's hard. And then, at
Yes.
the end of the summer, you do a final evaluation with them. Like thinking
Hmm.
back on that now, that we were teenagers doing such a grown up thing.
Yes. And
But
with peers or friends,
yes,
like,
yes, yeah,
yes.
yeah. And it really did push me to grow to do that. Like there aren't very many other places where, you know, my peers outside of camp were doing that and were getting that experience or leading groups, right? Just standing in front of a whole group of people, whether that is staff training. The camp I worked at, we ran an outdoor center in the spring and in the fall. And so another opportunity to stand in front of corporate groups like adults or college students who were at that time like, oh my goodness, college students, like
Yeah, yeah,
they're
that's right. Yes.
intimidating.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Hmm.
just being able to do that, and I can remember being like nervous about it going into it, and like, oh, this is going to be so scary. What if they don't like me? What if they don't think I'm cool and fun? And I think every time you did it, you're like you were saying, like as a camper looking at the counselors, you get put on a pedestal.
Hmm.
And I think that like just this magical pedestal of camp that people just see you as, oh yeah, that person is just themselves, just free to be, and they want to lean in. And that was a
Hmm.
really incredible experience.
Being a young person can be tough. Raising a young person can be tough. Whether it's school stress, family dynamics, or navigating challenging emotions, everyone needs the right support. That's where Sound Youth Counseling comes in. We specialize in helping children ages 4 and up through individual, parent, and family counseling tailored to meet each person's unique needs. From tackling tough issues at home or school to providing customized workshops and professional development for teachers and community leaders, we're here to make a difference. At Sound Youth Counseling, we believe young people deserve a safe, welcoming, and accepting space to grow and thrive, and every family deserves the tools to support them. If you're looking for support, visit soundyouthcounseling.ca and see how we can help. Sound Youth Counseling, empowering individuals, supporting families, and building stronger communities.
Sometimes looking back to, I wonder if there's, in some ways, it almost was a disservice for what I thought work would be like and what I thought, in kind of that professional environment would be like in other places, because it's the level of leadership that you see in camp people. I really, you don't see often other places in the same way. And there's this like magic around it all. And I think in some ways, when I moved outside of camp to have full-time jobs, there was a little bit of a disappointment in that of what it was like. It was different. And I think that was a hard, going into camp might be a hard transition sometimes when you're starting, and I think almost leaving it is too.
Oh yeah. I think the reality of life outside of camp, it almost feels like a bubble at times.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the other workplaces just didn't seem to match up to the magic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I think back to camp and the training that we had. And, the first camp I worked at, it was a full week of staff training. And yes, lots of learning skills, but also so much group development, so
Yes.
much just play together and, develop as a group together and learn about yourself and how you interact with others, your own leadership style. But the most meaningful things were, campfires at night. That really instilled this feeling of, wow, why are we all here? What is this all about? Being together, being seen, and being valued, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
a stage and do whatever ridiculous thing you're about to do.
Yeah, that's true though. Like, why are we in this together? Because they are very mission value driven experiences,
Hmm.
which, yeah, the investment, and maybe because it's such a seasonal operation in many ways, a number will operate throughout the year, but that's summer program. So, having to do that every year, bring in people and get them all on board very quickly with a shared vision, um,
Hmm.
is really special. And I think sometimes because of, you know, parameters around what you can ask employees to do and budget and all those things is, missed sometimes because there just isn't the opportunity to do that outside of camp. But yeah, it really did align everyone. You felt like you were a part of something bigger than yourself.
I think in some of my jobs after camp, just the focus on the skills that you need to do the job was much more prominent than why are we doing the work here, and
Mhm.
bringing everybody together. But the focus becomes so much about the skill, and then it's okay, am I performing well? Am I doing the skill well enough that I'm doing
Mhm.
well at my job? And I think like so much, a huge part of that missing ingredient is why. Like, why do we do what we do? And that
Mhm.
kind of creates that magic that I felt at camp.
This isn't camp related, but it reminds me of when I was in fourth year university, the faculty I was a part of, the faculty of my program, they were looking to hire a new professor. And so as part of our classes, we had to go and listen and fill out these little like feedback forms and things. And my thesis supervisor, I remember meeting with her, and we were talking about a few of the people and the presentations, and I was like, oh yeah, this person was interesting and shared this and this. And she said, but which one of them made you want to go back and hear them talk again? She's like, outside of what they talked about, who? And I was like, oh, well, that's not on the feedback form. She said, I know, but who hooked you? Who got you in? She said, because, you can teach research. You can teach those, hard skills that they talk about at camp sometimes, right? Hard skills or soft skills or however they are. And she said, but you can't always teach someone to be an engaging presenter. And I was like,
Hmm.
yes, that
Hmm.
that's so, yeah, there's a piece of that that's
Yeah.
always stuck with me.
I think
Mhm.
even when I, was working at camp or even life after camp, if I'm focused on, okay, am I performing, like what skill am I performing right now? And am I doing it well? And
Mhm.
am I doing it to a T? Or even if I'm giving presentations, I'm like, okay, how well do I know the material? I find myself feeling quite anxious. I'm like, oh, did I
Mhm.
remember the stats? Did I remember the numbers? What am I
Yes.
sharing? And then if I can just go back to, okay, wait, like, why do I do this work? Like,
Mhm.
that's the important thing. Then
Mhm.
I feel so much more confident in what it
Yes.
is that I'm sharing. And I
Yes.
think about that too with um, like life outside of camp and work. So many staff, especially, young folks out of post-secondary school or whatever, are so focused on, am I doing my job well? And am I going to
Mhm.
get like praise for doing my job well? And I
Mhm.
always think, you know, especially in the field that I work in, you're not hired because you can do your job well 100%. You're hired because there's something about you that gets what it is that we do, that gets,
Yes.
seeing people and what that feels like, and
Yes.
valuing others and wanting to be heard and all of that. And I find myself trying to shift this balance of, hey, how do we get back to that? Because when we get
Yes.
back to that, we can be more real.
Yeah.
And when we kind of get stuck in, well, how well am I doing? Then we get
Mhm.
lost from why it is that we do the work in the first place.
I remember a sort of mantra or the underlying piece at camp where I grew up around teaching skills was always, we teach the camper, we don't teach the skill. And
Uh,
and it's, kind of to your point, right? It's you connect. And if you don't have the connection, then what's being learned? And
mhm.
and yeah, can you on a level connect with someone? And that's another piece that has always stuck with me too, of connecting with the person before, it's teaching the person, not the skill, which I always
Yeah,
loved. Yeah.
that's great. We teach the camper, not the skill. I'm going to take that
Hmm.
one with me.
I know. I've carried it for many years. Yes. So okay, so let's think of, people who might be trying to figure out what to do for the summer, or for parents thinking of, is summer camp worth it, or should I do this? Because they're expensive, and there are a lot of different camps out there. It's hard to know what one, or um, what would, I mean, I think we both have the perspective of camps valuable. Um,
Mhm.
what else, what would you say if a parent was asking you, I'm just not sure. They want to go to camp. I'm not sure.
When I think about camp, I think about it as a space, like a bubble, like we talked about earlier. It's a space away from, the expectations and perceptions of how you should be in life. And I think oftentimes young people and children, it's not necessarily that there are, spoken expectations spoken out loud that are like, you have to be this
Mm,
way and you need to do this. But
mhm,
kids are bright. Kids are really bright and so aware of their surroundings and the people around them that they're taking in any sort of information and making their own stories around how they feel they should be as people. And so when I think about camp, that's a space where they can be away from all of that, away from those, unspoken
mhm,
expectations. And
mhm,
it's an opportunity for them to explore who they are, and whether that's camp or just another space where they can be,
mhm.
that in itself is so valuable.
I know there's a couple, at least, organizations that also help with sponsoring and, financially subsidizing people to go to camp, because sometimes they can be really, really pricey. So we can share some of those links too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm thinking about,
Mm,
that value of camp or summer camp is is for the parents and caregivers as well. This opportunity to practice, like letting
Mhm.
go or separating and individuating from your child, but also knowing that they're going to be cared for and seen
Mhm.
in a really effective and healthy way. And that, they might have bumps along the road, but they're also given the space to learn how to, clean up messes, or how do I get up after I've fallen down. And huge, that's a huge thing for parents as well.
It is.
Mhm.
Yes, the separating can be harder on the parents sometimes.
Mhm.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yes, but yeah, knowing they're in good hands, and how wonderful for a young person to learn that, they can make those mistakes, or be nurtured and cared for by people outside of their family home too, is
Mhm.
a wonderful gift. Cool. Okay. Thanks, Anne.
No problem.
One of the reasons I was so looking forward to speaking with Anne about summer camp is because I know the impact that it had for her, for me, and the and how we are very much the people we are today because of that experience. And it speaks to the core mission of this podcast of exception seeking. How do we disrupt our belief system in a way that lets us see other perspectives on ourselves? How do we draw on different experiences to say, oh, I always thought this was me, or I had to fit in this box. And I suppose in different environments, maybe I can stretch those boundaries a bit. Maybe I can learn new things about myself. And I think summer camp is a beautiful opportunity to give young people to say, go find some exceptions to the rule, go find some different aspects of yourself that you didn't even know you had. Go experiment and try different things in a different environment where exploration is celebrated.
Thanks for listening to Exception Seekers. Tune in again as we continue to seek overlooked stories that offer new perspectives, disrupt limiting beliefs, and inspire transformative approaches to nurturing youth mental health.
This podcast was produced by North Star Networks, the guiding light for progressive media.